Hello and welcome to the second video in the series of the IPN Emergency Communications course. Over the next few weeks we're going to discuss high frequency, very high frequency and ultra high frequency forms of radio communications, most of which require a license in order to operate. The purpose of this course is to provide you with sufficient information so that you may become an advanced radio license holder. Why do I say advanced license? Well, in certain countries there is a tiered structure in terms of licensing. Every country is different, but on an introductory license you may be only allowed to operate certain types of radio on certain frequencies. Now imagine a situation where an emergency had just taken place and you were called to assist, but you had left your radio equipment at home. Now, imagine for a moment that you are a basic radio operator and your friend, who is also a radio operator, is of a higher license category. So he has brought his radios with him. Well, this sounds absolutely perfect. The two of you can use the radios together and provide a great community service. But can you? Because you are the basic license, maybe you're not actually allowed to use his types of radio that he has brought with him. So in a situation like that, I think that is a dreadful shame. And what I would recommend is for you to just put a little bit of extra effort into it and become an advanced or full privileges radio license operator. Okay, so we're just going to deviate a little bit away from the licensing for now, and we're going to talk about license exempt forms of UHF radio. Why are we talking about license exempt? Well, license exempt means that anybody can use them. It doesn't matter nearly who you are, and they're very easy to use. So if you're a grandmother or a young child, you can use these particular license exempt types of radio. These license exempt services have been allocated by government to recreational users, hikers, campers, and in some cases small businesses, even including farming. Now, we're mainly dealing with UHF forms of communication, and every wave has a different characteristic based on its frequency. So what does UHF actually do? Well, used very nicely in the countryside. They can give you good range. When I say good range, maybe a kilometre or a few kilometres. If you get up onto high ground, such as a hill, you can get much further distances. They are a lot more limited than licensed, and they're not something that you would want to ever depend on in an emergency situation, or general communication for that matter. But in saying that, they can be beneficial on some occasions. If you have incredibly flat ground with no forests in your way of line of sight, or you have no buildings, or you have no hills or any obstructions of that nature, then UHF is certainly a good service. Every one of those basically blocks UHF signals. So if there's any of that in the way of you and the other person, UHF becomes pretty useless to an extent. So that's why I was saying when you stand on top of a hill, it's much better with UHF. With the license exempt UHF, they also have a lot of limitations when it comes to the antenna of the radio. And the antenna, generally, of any radio, is one of the most important parts. The better the antenna, generally the better the communication in terms of signal. These radios are also low power, so they don't, between the whole factors of the poor quality antenna, the low power, and this is all on purpose, the way that it's designed, you're limiting the distance that license exempt user can actually affect other people outside of his local area. So it's useful for families that are out camping, useful for people that are hiking. I use it all the time for staying in touch with my family while I'm out doing farm work. So it's hugely beneficial in that regard, but you can't have hills and forests between you and the other person. You're no doubt wondering at this point what UHF licence exempt services are available for use in my country. Well, if you're living within the EU, most EU countries allow a service called PMR 446, and that one allows you 8 channels in order to operate on. I've travelled all over Europe and I have used PMR everywhere that I've gone. That's in the countryside, in towns, villages, and I've never once come across a situation where more than 5 channels are in use at any one time. So 8 channels is absolutely fine. There's more than enough to use on that service. In America, they have a similar service which just operates on different frequencies than the European one. The reason why the two services actually operate on different frequencies is because I'll just give you an example of how important it is that you don't use, shall we say, an American radio in Europe. The American version operates on a set of frequencies that are used by the fire brigades and ambulance services in the European Union. So you can't use the American service in the EU for obvious reasons. So the American service, well, how many channels do you get with that one? You get 14 channels with it. 7 of them are shared with another radio service in America called GMRS, which we'll be covering in a different video. The reason that we're not covering GMRS in this video is because it's technically a licensed service, and obviously this video is about license exempt. But just to make you aware, there is a 7-channel crossover there in America where the FRS, 7 of their out of the 14 channels communicate actually with GMRS users. So just be aware of that. It doesn't necessarily affect how you use your FRS radio. It just means that you should be aware that there are other users, namely GMRS users, who can actually overhear what you're saying on your FRS service. Okay, so how do these radios generally work? I mean, they're pretty much the exact same format in terms of radio. They have the same buttons, they have the same design, they're just operating in different frequencies. In this next little part, we're going to look very briefly at how to turn them on, how to change channels, etc. These license exempt radios are designed for hikers and campers, people who do not require a full knowledge of how radios operate, and as you can see, all of the channels are programmed in. They can't modify the frequency. They're locked into only operating on a certain number of frequencies. So there's no complication with it. There's not an off button. There's a little pager in most of them that you can send a little ring or something to all your team members to let them know that you want to break into a conversation. You've got your menu select button. You've got your up and down, which can be used for your volume control. You can see the volume there. Or for if you're in the menu button and you can cycle through channels or cycle through your privacy tones or your sensitivity of the microphone or whatever feature is built into your radio. Most of them operate on the same output, and the reason for that is because it's a legal requirement. You can't manufacture one of these radios unless it meets the legal specification of the license exempt status in that country. So if it says in the law that it has to be no greater than 500 milliwatts of power output through the antenna, then that's what it has to be designed to do, and you can't modify the device in order to increase that, because then you would no longer have a license exempt radio and you'd be breaking the law.